Oh, Jack. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. My name is Nick Hayes, and I am delighted to serve as your worship associate today and to welcome you fully into this space. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies here. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit here. We welcome all you are bringing with you today and all your heart longs to set down. We extend a special welcome to each guest among us. We invite our guests to fill out a welcome card located in the pew rack in front of you and drop it in the offering plate later in the service. Guests may also pick up a welcome packet at the back of the sanctuary, where folks will also find hearing assist devices and Braille hymnals. A fragrance-free area is located on the front right side in the first few pews. If you are a visiting family, including children or youth, after the time for all ages noted in your order of service, please join the children's recessional and head across the hall to the common room. There you will be greeted by someone who will orient you to religious education. Immediately following the service, everyone is invited for coffee and conversation in the common room. My name again is Nick Hayes, and you can come talk to me at the guest table there. As a way to engage at First Church, I invite everyone to explore the announcements insert for the numerous opportunities available here. In particular, let me draw your attention to one. Stop by the social justice table after services today to meet Andre Lee Ellis, the founder of We Got This Milwaukee, which is our December Share the Plate recipient. Andre will be joined by some of the young men who have worked in the We Got This Gardens. Andre and the young men will also be attending this service. Are you here? Maybe they'll join us a little later. If you have difficulty hearing in our sanctuary, try a hearing-assisted device, which is in the back. Please find details on these and more events in the announcements insert. And finally, please silence any electronic devices for the remainder of the service. Once again, I welcome you to First Church by inviting you to join me in the unison reading of our mission, which is printed in your order of service. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. And now I'd like to welcome my friend Lisa Geis to light our chalice this morning.
Our opening words this morning are adapted from Carmel Point by Robinson Jeffers. Oh, the extraordinary patience of things. This beautiful place defaced with a crop of suburban houses, how beautiful when we first beheld it. Unbroken field of poppy walled with clean cliffs. No intrusion but 2 or 3 horses pasturing or a few milch cows rubbing their flanks on the outcrop rockheads. Now the spoiler is coming. Does it care? Not faintly. It has all time. It knows people are a tide that swells and in time will ebb and all their works dissolve. Meanwhile, the image of the pristine beauty lives in the very grain of the granite, safe as the endless ocean that climbs our cliff. As for us, we must uncenter our minds from ourselves. We must unhumanize our views a little and become confident as the rock and ocean we were made from. Will you please rise in body or spirit and join us in singing our opening hymn, number 1.
The story I have for you today is a story about me and this robe that you see me wearing in the sanctuary each week. Many people have outfits that they wear to work for many different reasons. A doctor often wears a white coat, or a fire person wears a certain kind of outfit to work and another certain kind of outfit when they go to fight a fire. Before I started working in churches, I was a teacher working at a school, and I loved being an art teacher. I got to be messy almost every single day and make art with children. When I was an art teacher, I wore an apron because of the messy part of making art. Have you ever wondered why ministers wear a robe? It is not to prevent me from getting messy. In fact, the children who go downstairs with me already know this, but every week I go downstairs and I take off the robe so that I don't get any mess on it. Ministers do not wear robes all the time. I never wear mine to the grocery store. Do you wear yours to the grocery store? We never wear it to the grocery store. But we do wear our robes during worship, the time that we set aside to honor what is worthy together. It's a special time, and the robe that we wear is a symbol to mark that shift in time. Have you also noticed that it looks a little like a graduation robe? Yeah. So to become a minister of religious education, I had to go back to school, a seminary school, and I had to learn a lot more about religion. And when you go to seminary, it is traditional also then to begin to wear a robe during worship. So for me, the robe represents a lot of different things. One, the important learning that I needed to do in order to become a minister, and also this sacred time that we spend together honoring what is worthy. So today is special for me because I get to wear my robe for the first time since passing what my kiddo calls the very big minister test. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Last week I went to Boston and I saw the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, and they told me I could officially become a UU minister. So thank you. Yay.
So last week, our Director of Religious Education, Kimberly, was granted preliminary fellowship by the Ministerial Fellowship Committee. That's the committee that judges who is qualified to become a Unitarian Universalist minister based on years of training and education and written work and preaching and an oral exam, the very big minister test. The committee gave Kimberly the highest score that they give out, and she is now cleared to pursue ordination as a Unitarian Universalist minister. Passing the Ministerial Fellowship Committee is a huge accomplishment, and it is the last hurdle in a long road of hurdles to becoming a UU minister. We are so fortunate to have Kimberly here with us following her call to serve in the ministry of religious education in her dream job with First Church.
Kimberly.
Yes, Dina.
Welcome to fellowship in the living tradition of Unitarian Universalist ministry. You've done it. You passed the dreaded yet sacred interview with the MFC, which tested your knowledge, skill, and your grace under pressure. I'm honored to work beside you as your colleague in this wonderful and challenging endeavor called ministry. Although you've spent decades serving our Unitarian Universalist movement in a variety of capacities, now you are at the beginning of a new adventure. And although you already know almost everyone in our UU Ministers Association, it's true, more people than I do, receiving fellowship means that you are now woven even more closely into community and collegiality. Our UUMA guidelines and code of conduct which you ministers promise to uphold, are the warp and weft of that fabric of community to which you will add the fiber of your being, the color of your dreams, and the shining thread of your unique creativity. And our ministry will be stronger and more beautiful for it. So I have a gift for you that represents the care and compassion that you bring to ministry. It is a handmade rainbow shawl from our shawl ministry at First Church. May it remind you of the power of both giving and receiving, and may it help you to follow the rainbow path. Turn around, please.
Oh, it's so gorgeous. Thank you. It's beautiful.
So Kimberly, I want to welcome you into fellowship, but also into collegiality as someone who serves this wonderful congregation. I have already experienced your collegiality as a gift, and so I have gotten you a gift in return. This gift is in honor of the learned ministry, and in particular, in honor of our intellectual connection, which nourishes me personally. But also in honor of the fact that you are a storyteller and that you bring a particular kind of healing love medicine to your ministry with our children and our families. And also, since Kimberly now has the opportunity to read books for pleasure again, I'm sharing a novel. This is Love Medicine. It's one of my favorites, and I share this with you in the hopes of a winter that includes good books by the fire with your feet up. Welcome to fellowship. Let's give Kimberly one more round of applause. Congregation, will you rise in body or spirit and join us for our children's recessional hymn number 21. We invite children and teachers to sing verse 1 of the hymn and I'd like to invite you in now to a time of contemplation, which will be followed by silence, followed by the seated singing of Spirit of Life. So just take a moment to get comfortable and center yourselves. Do what you need to do to feel your body. Maybe you feel your feet on the floor grounding you. Or the top of your head connecting you to all that is. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. Help us remember that our lives sit within a larger love, a web connecting each of us to all that is in the vastness of time and space. May we feel the connection to the humans that came before us and those who will come after we are gone, to the water that nourishes us, and the ground from which we came and to which we will return. May we feel connected to the largeness of life, to the earth and the sun and the moon, to beauty and darkness and the fire of distant stars. May we be connected to all that is, to each other, and to the holy radiating in every single thing. May it be so.
10,000 years ago, climate change left 1/5 of the world's surface freshwater 4 blocks from here. Lake Michigan is among the darkest places in these United States. So if you are lucky to be at mid-lake on a clear night, you'll see more stars than you may have ever seen, and the aurora borealis may make a surprise appearance. She's also large enough to make her own climate. Think lake effect snow. And a warm spring heats the water, supercharging summer storms. If you are unlucky to be at Mid-Lake for one of these events, you may find yourself praying. At 1 a.m. on one memorable Sunday night, we were sailing northbound fast in flat water under a billowing spinnaker 40 miles offshore. Sometimes a nighttime storm announces itself with lightning in the west. Other times it appears on the horizon as a rolling cigar cloud called an Arcus. Even the word is scary. This terrifying beast portends 250 million gallons of rainwater dumping out of the approaching anvil and displacing the surface air, which rushes out in all directions for miles. The danger is especially acute on the leading edge, called the gust front, where the pressure combines with the storm's speed to produce sometimes hurricane force winds. On this dark night, it hit without warning and lasted longer than anyone on the mostly veteran crew had ever seen before. The blast flattened us and held us down, destroying sails and gear and sending us into survival mode while also unleashing torrential rain, breaking waves across the deck, and lightning so close the thunder rattled your skull. Survival mode is more than just wearing a life preserver. It is human nature in conflict, because nature seems in conflict with humans. You try best you can to ignore an overwhelming fight or flight instinct in order to get vital work done, like tying down your friends in order not to lose them. I remember thinking that nothing was in our control. Eventually the front passed, leaving a more manageable headwind, but raucous waves, so it took us the rest of the night to recover. We had heads to count, bodies to warm, gear to fix, bandages to wrap, and our own meekness to consider. Now is about the time in the story when most people, especially my mom, asks, why? Well, as an orange glow appeared on the east horizon, I began a 4-hour watch as a sail trimmer, along with a favorite crewmate with a kind of gentle, nomadic, Buddhist surfer spirit, and whose turn it was to drive. Now, once settled into our work, he struck up a conversation asking, "Holy cow, where'd that awful stuff come from?" Now, his was a rhetorical question, and yet I could not hold back a rational scientific explanation. I'd been brooding on it all night. Wind comes from pressure, which comes from heat. Now, most of the heat on Earth comes from the sun, and it's the product of a chain reaction of hydrogen atoms fusing into helium at the sun's core. It ignited when a swirling space nebula, a massive gas and dust cloud that had been growing since the Big Bang, collapsed under its own weight to form the sun and the planets about 4.5 billion years ago. There's still 5 billion years worth of fuel up there. So last night's wind was not even a blip on the space-time continuum. When he fell silent, I realized that my answer, while fact-based, wasn't satisfying. It lacked mystery and wonder and awe. It made the moment seem small. The moment wasn't small. Humbling, yes, but also empowering to everyone in it, including me. Just then the sun peeked over the horizon as if to weigh in itself, and my friend squinted and pulled down his Ray-Bans and grinned, and he let me off the hook. He said, "That makes our boat a spacecraft. A time machine stealing sparks from the heavens and spinning them into speed. It's our toehold, our connection to the cosmos. So trim the mainsail, man, because here comes another gift from the gods. So I pulled hard, and he nudged the bow, and the boat caught the edge of a wave, and it took off on a 10-second surf. And he shouted, "Totally awesome, dude!" And the exhausted and waterlogged team, men, women, kids, and adults, let out a joyful cheer. And that, friends, is why.
Last month, I was driving down to a minister's study group in St. Louis with my colleague, Reverend Matthew Johnson, when we hit a nasty ice storm. This was mid-November, and apparently Southern Illinois thought it was just too early to have ordered their salt. So driving conditions were pretty treacherous. We slowed down to 40 and then to 20 miles an hour, and on our drive we saw at least 30 crashed vehicles. Cars and minivans, but also pickup trucks and even several semis in the ditch on the side of the road. And then at one point I saw something on our right, and I said to Matthew, Wait a second, is that a house? And yes, indeed, this was such a nasty ice storm that there was a house crashed on the side of the road. And I came to understand that the ice storm had sent us to Oz. And I wondered aloud if we should check under that house for the Wicked Witch of the East. Towards the end of our ride, Matthew was white-knuckling it at 8 miles an hour down the last little road to our retreat center, and we saw another car in the ditch. And then we heard a loud crack, and a bluish-green light streaked across the sky, lighting up the road. What in the world was that? Was it some random November firework, or maybe someone lighting a flare for help? Couldn't be a meteor, Matthew said. No, I said. Too close. Maybe it was someone on the other side of that hill calling for help. The next morning I read the news. A meteor had streaked across the Missouri sky the night before. The American Meteor Society had reports from people from 8 different states, Missouri, of course, but also Wisconsin and as far away as Nevada. The meteor was moving from east to west, and it landed somewhere in Wellsville, Missouri, which was less than 100 miles from where we were. When it entered the Earth's atmosphere, it was probably about 5 feet across and traveling somewhere between 30,000 and 45,000 miles per hour, which is much faster than the speed of sound, a mere 770 miles per hour. So what we had heard was a sonic boom when the meteor broke through the Earth's atmosphere. The bright light was the heat of the meteor's speed vaporizing that 5-foot rock. In the morning, a museum was offering $25,000 to anyone who could find a piece of the meteor in Wellsville. Now, it turns out it's hard to find pieces of meteor in a countryside. It's like looking for rocks among rocks. But amazingly, in April of this year, a different meteor fell on a small Costa Rican town, and the next morning, the mother of the family living where the meteor landed put on a pair of clean plastic gloves, like you do, got her trusty plastic bag, and went out meteor hunting. She found a big piece of the rock, collected it, and sealed it up in that plastic bag within 12 hours of it landing on Earth, which means that she kept it in pristine condition. In October of this year, a donor gave a piece of that meteorite to the Chicago Field Museum, who began testing its properties. What they found is completely amazing. They found clues in the meteorite to the origins of life on Earth. Because it was so perfectly preserved, inside of it are perfectly preserved building blocks of life, organic compounds that were formed during the early solar system. But this particular meteor also includes compounds that are older than our solar system, older than the Earth, older than the sun. The meteor formed about 4.6 billion years ago, which is about the same age as the sun, but it includes stardust, which is older than that dates back to 4.9 or 5 billion years ago. Now that stardust doesn't match anything in our solar system, but its compounds matches exactly stars that are incredibly far away from here. Scientists believe that other meteors delivered similar compounds, carbon, amino acids, sugar, and alcohol to the earth at the beginning of our Earth's life 4.5 billion years ago, and that those compounds delivered by meteors were the beginning of life on Earth. This means that the carbon that's in our bodies and in all of life was formed in the interior of stars and then ejected out into space. That stardust then traveled around the universe for a very long time before forming into solid rocks and eventually running into the earth and forming life as we know it. So your body is literally the product of stardust and love and a hell of a lot of time. Philip Heck, the Chicago Field Museum's associate curator for meteoritics and polar studies, said that this meteor is basically a time capsule to our early solar system. He said that the rock likely holds answers to questions about the origin of the oxygen that humans breathe and about the carbon from which we are made. In our solar system, the sun came first. That was about 4.6 billion years ago, and the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. The rocks that hold our Great Lakes were formed about 330 million years ago, back when Wisconsin was located by the equator. Our ancestors became mostly bipedal, mostly walked around on 2 feet, about 4 million years ago. And our human brains grew to be about their current size just a couple 100,000 years ago. And then, of course, around 10,000 years ago, human beings changed everything when they began to cultivate agriculture. Like many people, I've been shocked into awe by the scale of the universe. I remember walking through the redwoods in California, through living organisms that were 60 times as tall as I am and 10,000 times my size and volume, that would grow together in these big redwood groves. These giant living things can live for more than 2,000 years. So that day, I met trees that were alive during Jesus' time, that were already 500 years old when the prophet Muhammad was born, and that had been alive for more than 1,000 years when Shakespeare was writing Romeo and Juliet. But even though that seems unfathomably long to me and astounding to be able to meet something that's alive today that was 1,000 years old when Shakespeare was writing Romeo and Juliet, what I know is that is just a feather scratching the surface of the mountain of time. To understand the scale of time, 1,000 seconds is 16.6 minutes, while 1,000,000 seconds is 12 days, and 1,000,000,000 seconds is 31 years. So in our lives, when we talk about 1,000 years of human history, in comparison to 4.5 billion years of the earth, the comparison is amazing. If every year equaled 1 second, a human life would be 90 seconds long, maybe 100 seconds long, and the earth's life would be 140 years long. Something about contemplating the vastness of time can give us a sense of place, or maybe give us a sense of being suspended in space, held between the extremes of the earliest beginnings that we know, the Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago, and a thought projection of billions of years into the future. And then there are crazy questions like, what was before the Big Bang? And what comes after? When and how does all of this end? But here we are, floating in this present moment, unable to know the absolute origins or endings of life. University of California psychology professor Dr. Keltner calls awe the ultimate collective emotion, because awe motivates people to act for the common good. In his research with Paul Piff, Keltner found that people who, quote, reported experiencing more awe in their lives, who felt more regular wonder and beauty in the world around them, were more generous to strangers. In an experiment where they asked groups of people to spend a minute, just a minute, looking at a group of tall trees versus a group of people who are asked to spend a minute looking at a building, the tall tree lookers were more helpful to a stranger who accidentally tripped and dropped a bunch of stuff. The research found that people who experience awe are more likely to share resources and to make sacrifices for others. It's because awe makes us feel connected to the world around us. It inspires us to cooperate with each other in the interest of the whole because we feel connected to that whole. Keltner and Piff found that even momentary experiences of awe shifted people's perceptions of themselves, such that they were more humble in the face of larger life. It then led those people to behave in less selfish and less entitled ways, and connected them to their shared humanity, even with strangers. Born from the same stardust that traveled here more than 4.5 billion years ago, and then forged in the crucible of entropy and thirst and desire, we tell ourselves stories about awe and why, and we reach for beauty. Telling these kinds of awesome stories of connection in the face of darkness or fear is good for us. A little humility in the face of vastness makes us kinder and more cooperative people. There are a number of powerful stories that people tell around this time of year to remember the holy and reconnect with awe and each other. One is the Christian story of incarnation, of the pure love that comes in the form of a baby, reading divine revelation in through the body. Christian churches are in Advent right now, and many today are telling the story of the Magnificat, Mary becoming pregnant. Unitarian Universalist Christian minister Reverend Robin Bartlett said, "What a ridiculously hopeful and insane act it is to bring babies into our world. It has to be some combination of biology overriding our brains and God insisting on entering into a world, whether that world is ready for God or not." Babies bring with them awe and wonder and beauty soaked in ages. Advent is a period of waiting for God's incarnation to be born into the world on Christmas Day, waiting for life, for hope, for light, and for that new baby who came into the world through struggle and poverty to an oppressed people who were fighting for their freedom. Another story that human beings tell this time of year is the story of light, burning miraculously in the darkness for 8 days, evidence of God's continuing presence with the Jewish people. Jewish communities will begin celebrating Hanukkah next Sunday evening, lighting one more candle each night to honor God's continued presence in the temple. Hanukkah also remembers the Jewish people's struggle for freedom. The story of the Maccabees, a small group of people fighting against a massive, oppressive power and miraculously winning. When they did, the first thing they did was rededicate their temple to God. The word Hanukkah means rededication. Hanukkah honors the presence of the holy, returns us as a people to awe at that oil burning in the lamp longer than anyone ever thought it could. Another story that human beings tell this time of year is about the return of the sun. Living in the northern hemisphere, this is when our days are shortest and our nights are very, very long. We're approaching the time of the year, winter solstice, when the night is the strongest. It's also the night when the solstice stories say that the goddess gives birth to the sun again. Solstice recognizes that death is also about rebirth, that night is also about day, that embedded in one reality is the birth of its opposite. At solstice, we can feel the full stillness of the night, what Starhawk called the eye of the needle of the night, the stillness behind motion when time itself stops. We can honor the beauty and the gifts of the still and quiet night, and also know that the moment of the height of darkness is simultaneously the turning point when the sun is born again and slowly begins to grow. It's getting cold and dark in our part of the world right now, and there are many fearsome things around. Oppression and climate change, cruelty and hate. We need stories that help us make meaning of our experience, that use darkness and awe and human struggle for fodder for understanding our lives. We need stories about hope against despair, candles and oil lamps and bright stars leading the way through the night. We need stories that help us feel awe and connection to one another, even when it's dark out and we're a little bit scared. Using a story, we can turn fear into humility in the face of greatness. Matthew and I made it safely to our destination on that November night, and we unpacked the car a little giddy as the adrenaline ran out of our bodies. Mother Nature is a powerful reminder that we are small compared to the largeness of Earth, let alone to the mind-boggling vastness of time. Author Avis Crow wrote, "Help me to be less fearful of the measure of time and more fully alive in the time that simply is. Help me to live in time, not just to simply use it, to breathe time in and return in it acts of love and presence." Acts of love and presence. Even when life is scary, it's worth the risk to live and to love and to connect. Looking into the vastness of billions of years can help us remember that we only have this one brief time right now. May we use it to love someone. May we use it to love ourselves, to be kind to one another, to appreciate the beauty of the world, and let awe bring us humbly to this life. That night in November, alive and grateful, Matthew and I gathered with our friends by the fire, laughing and talking and feeling our small lives connected into the great web of all being. This December, my dear ones, may you also feel connected to all that is. May it be so. Will you please rise in body or spirit and join in the responsive reading which is printed in your orders of service? This is adapted from The Risk of Birth by Madeline L'Engle. I'll begin. This is no time for a child to be born.
With the earth betrayed by war and hate,
and meteors slashing the sky to warn.
the time runs out, and the sun burns late.
That was no time for a child to be born.
In a land in the rushing river of Rome,
Honor and truth were trampled to scorn.
yet there too did love make its home.
When is the time for love to be born?
The inn is full on planet Earth,
And by a comet the sky is torn.
yet love still takes for this birth.
And will you join us in singing our closing hymn? Friends, as you face the vastness of time, may you experience awe and beauty and love in the one precious life you have been given. May it be so.